I'm getting married." She said it as if she were simply talking about the weather. She was smiling. Eyes steady. Voice light as air. I froze. Not out of shock, but because I didn't know what to say. For years, she had been the strongest person I knew. Independent. Self-reliant. Whole in every way. She had everything she needed. And never once looked like she needed a man beside her. She used to say, "I can live just fine on my own." And she truly did. But today, sitting in front of me, with that same familiar calm in her eyes, there was something different. A quiet kind of peace. And a decision. Soft but unwavering. Like the very first sunlight of summer. After a few seconds of silence, all I could say was a simple question. "Are you really ready?" Not out of doubt, but from the quiet concern of an old friend. She smiled. Didn't answer right away. Just took a sip of tea and looked off into the distance, as if recalling something deeply personal. "The kids asked me the same thing," she said. One was surprised, one cried. But in the end, they both held me for a long time. Then she added softly, "I think their hearts understood." I didn't ask anything else. Because I felt it too. Some choices don't need explanations. Only a steady gaze. And someone beside you, who feels like peace. A few days later, the wedding invitation arrived. No fancy design. No glamorous photos. Just a simple white card with a pale lavender border. And a handwritten note that looked like it came from decades ago. "I'd be so happy if you could come." I held the card in my hand. And my heart went quiet. It wasn't the wedding. It wasn't the paper. It was knowing that to arrive at this moment, she had likely walked through things no one else could see. I wondered. When she wrote those words, was her heart trembling? Did she think about the looks from relatives? The questions from her children? The voices that might say, "At this age, what for?" Maybe she did. But still, she wrote it. Still sent it. And still invited me, like an old friend keeping a promise, to walk through one more season together. The ceremony took place on a quiet weekend morning. Not in a grand hall. No extravagant flower arches or loud music like a young couple's wedding. Just a small courtyard beneath an old tree. Wooden chairs, white tablecloths, and a few paper lanterns swaying gently. Everything felt light. As if the air itself knew this was a special day. Without needing to say it out loud. She walked out in a simple cream dress. Eyes bright, smile soft. No loud music. No formal announcements. Just a few relatives, a few old friends. Our little group of longtime friends gathered around to congratulate her. And in the eyes of her grown children, there was something warm. As if they, too, were smiling quietly. Relieved and happy. That their mother finally had someone gentle to walk beside her. No one cried. No one cheered loudly. But there was something unmistakable in the air that day. A quiet faith. That at any age, you can still begin again. As long as your heart is still warm. When she walked down the aisle, everything seemed to slow down for a moment. It wasn't the lights. It wasn't the dress, which was simple. Really. It was her face. Something about it had changed. She didn't look like the busy, independent, strong woman I'd always known. She looked gentle. As if she was finally allowing herself to be happy. Sometimes, we think we know everything about our closest friends. But in that moment, I realized she had gone through a quiet journey. I had never fully seen. And today, she was choosing a new chapter, with clear eyes, and steps that were slow but sure. I sat there, silent. No one said a word. But inside me, something was deeply moved. Amid the clapping and smiling faces, Sarah stepped up slowly, the microphone trembling just a little in her hand. Not from stage fright, but because she was about to speak words she had kept quiet for a very long time. She took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping across the room, pausing briefly on the row where her children sat. "I used to think," she began, "that love belonged to the young. To passion, to heartbreak, to that feeling of being completely swept away. I had a love like that once. And I lost a love like that, too." She paused. Just for a second. But you could feel something tighten in her voice. "There were years when I couldn't sleep more than 3 hours a night. Not because someone left me, but because I didn't let myself fall apart. I had to be strong. For my kids. For my work. Because no one was there to hold me and say, 'It's okay to be tired. You can let go now.' I carried so much. I held up so much. And in doing so, I forgot how to be soft." She took in another breath, slower this time. No one moved. No one breathed too loud. And then he came along. He didn't try to rescue me. He didn't rush in with promises. He just stayed. Quietly, gently, consistently. She looked down for a moment. Then smiled. With him, I didn't have to pretend to be strong anymore. I was allowed to come back to the softness that had always been mine. Allowed to finally admit that I too deserved to be held with care. Her voice trembled, tears silently slipping down her cheeks. Not from sadness, but as if years of buried emotions were finally finding their way out. And today, I'm not choosing a perfect man. I'm choosing a man who knows how to love a woman who's no longer young. Gently, and for long enough to matter. I'm choosing the man with whom I can rest. Really rest. Because for once in my life, I don't have to hold everything alone anymore. And for that, he is the husband I want to walk beside. For the rest of my days. I don't remember who cried first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was one of her children. All I know is, in that moment, no one stayed in their heads. We sat there, and let our hearts break wide open, for a happiness that felt so true. Sometimes, it comes late. Very late. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a quiet moment. Like when someone's eyes rest on you for a little longer. And you're no longer afraid to meet them back. Love in youth burns bright. But love that comes later makes you quiet. Because by then, you've known loss. You've gotten used to the silence of long nights. And somewhere inside, you've stopped searching. I think she used to be like that. She once believed the door to love had closed for good. But not everyone needs to knock loudly to come in. He didn't shake her world. He simply stayed long enough for her to know she could finally step out of the armor and still be welcomed, gently. This time, love didn't begin with promises or expectations. No one had to prove they were worthy. No one had to fear they weren't enough. She didn't need someone to complete her. And he wasn't trying to be someone extraordinary in her life. Their love was quiet companionship. No gripping tight. No clinging. Just waking up each morning knowing she wasn't alone anymore. Knowing that, no matter how the world might change, someone would gently rest a hand on her shoulder and say, "It's good that you're here." She had always been strong, independent, proud. But this love didn't ask her to change that. It simply meant that, when she was with him, she didn't have to be strong all by herself anymore. It wasn't a second love. It wasn't what's left. It was love that arrived at the right time, when she had learned how to live honestly with herself, and had the courage to choose someone, not out of need, but because she wanted to walk together. There was no loud music, no long speeches, no crowd of guests, just a simple gathering, with the few people who truly loved her. No one pretended to be moved. No one asked, "Why now?" Because when they looked at her, they could feel something had changed. A sense of ease, a quiet glow in the eyes of a woman who had spent many years walking alone, and had finally allowed herself to receive happiness. She didn't need a reason. She didn't need to explain. She didn't need to convince anyone it was the right choice. It was simply that, one day, she chose to live honestly with her heart, and to move forward with someone who made her smile more than she worried. That wedding wasn't a destination. It was a quiet whisper to herself that said, "It's time. I deserve to be happy." They came back from a short honeymoon. Just a quiet trip by the sea, not far from the city. No check-ins. No updates on social media. Just the two of them, walking side by side along the shore, sitting quietly at sunset, talking about things no one had to answer right away. I stopped by her house. Nothing much had changed, but something in her eyes, as she brewed tea, as she called him from the other room, as she said, "We just got back," with the softest smile, made me pause. Not out of envy, not even surprise, but because something in my own heart softened, just watching her piece. She didn't try to convince me of anything. She didn't say love was real, or marriage was perfect. But sometimes, it only takes one look to make you believe in something beautiful. One more time. This isn't just a story about love. It's not about a wedding. It's about a woman who dared to choose what she truly wanted, at a time when no one expected it anymore. When I watched my friend walk down the aisle, I didn't see someone starting over. I saw someone finally returning to herself, after years of living for duty, for others, and for the fear of being judged. We often think that certain things are too late. But the truth is, being late has nothing to do with time. It only comes from refusing to listen to your heart. You don't need a wedding to begin again. You don't need approval. You don't need to be understood. Maybe what you're longing for is a new adventure, a dream you once put aside, a softer way of living, or simply the freedom to be vulnerable without guilt. As women, we have the right to live a life that's true to us. The right to say, enough, when we're tired. The right to say, I want, even if no one else planned for it. And we can begin, from anywhere, at any time. Don't wait until you feel young enough, ready enough, or convincing enough. Because the truth is, no one else will live your whole life for you. Only you will stay with yourself until the end. So live honestly. Not perfectly. Just honestly enough that you can place a hand on your heart and ask, whose life am I living? If your answer is, my own, then that is the most beautiful thing. You don't have to do anything right away. Just hold on to the feeling, like a quiet pause within you, a soft reminder that you're still listening to yourself. And when you're ready to take the next step, whether it's a small shift, a new decision, or simply a desire to live more gently with yourself, Heart of calm will still be here. I may not have the perfect answer for you, but I'll be here to listen and to feel deeply what your heart is quietly longing for.